Hi, thanks for joining us. This is a Women in Film, Vote for Women conversation. We have with us the director of Turning Red, Domee Shi, and the producer of Turning Red, Lindsey Collins. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to just say first and foremost, like how much I love this movie. I'm sure everybody comes to you with their insanely personal tales of why, but I mean, I was a huge fan of Bao, so I've been waiting and waiting for this. And I know that there were a lot of, I guess we could start with the first thing, which is what were your main influences and references, but I kind of specifically wanted to know in setting up the friends and their world, that friend group of your main character.
Yeah, May's friends are directly inspired by my own group of friends growing up in Toronto, which is a very diverse city. I had a lot of Asian friends, South Asian friends, and I just also wanted to use this as an opportunity to show how different girls can be and the different types of personalities that you might find in these tween girl friend groups. Like you have Miriam, May's closest friend, who's like the tomboy of the group. She's a skater chick. She's that friend that we've all had that our mom doesn't 100% approve of, that maybe is a little rebellious, that pushes you out of your comfort zone when you need it. And then you have Abby Park, May's like little fiery Korean friend who's like her ride or die. And Abby was directly inspired by the voice actress for the character and my real life bestie, Hayne Park. We went to animation school together, and she always surprised me with just how big her voice and her personality is, even though she is like tiny. She's tiny and mighty, and it just felt like a really fun element to kind of add to May's friend group. And then we have Priya, May's Indian friend, and she's just a shout out to all the South Asian kids I grew up with in Toronto, but also she has this like gothy side to her, this like witchy side that I think a lot of girls went through in their tween and teenage years. I know I did. I had a Buffy the Vampire Slayer phase, an Interview with the Vampire phase, and that's kind of Priya. Like she's kind of like dark and gothy in that way. And then it was also cool just to show different kinds of Asian girls in this movie as well, that we're not just saying Mei is like a blanket representation of all Asian girls, that you have Abby and Priya, and there's just so much variety even within that small specific group of people.
I think they were saying you were the first woman to direct a Pixar film. That is a lot of pressure. And then you had the added pressure of being like the representation for all North American Asian community. The boundaries you broke, and how girls and women's issues are often like trivialized or thought of as lesser than. And I just think it's such a technical achievement, this film, not just the storytelling and the characters you created, but it's always an uphill battle to make a movie like this. So thank you so much for making one and making it so beautifully. But I'd love for you to tell us a little about how I hear you spent like several years with animators going to Northern California and getting references and visual references, and that there were hand-drawn 2D animations, effects on top of the Pixar's 3D. Is this this sounds like an amazing technical achievement that nobody has really dug deeper into, and I want to know all about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we Domee had a really strong vision coming into the film, which is always super helpful because it actually really gets people early on engaged in trying to figure out what that looks like on the screen, and it doesn't feel like it's something that's kind of slapped on after the fact. I think we talk a lot about how to make sure that stylization doesn't feel like something that we're only kind of leaning into in one of our departments where everybody else is kind of doing the more traditional. So Domee was like exploring camera and animation and lighting and 2D effects. And so that all of that in theory works in concert so that it never feels like any one thing is popping out over another. It just feels like the whole thing is of a piece. And even that piece feels just fundamentally different and from a vision. So that was, I think, incredibly helpful, especially when you're doing anything new. Like it's not an easy thing to do something new, and especially when you don't have a clear vision. So I think that was enormously helpful. And also I think one of the guiding principles was, as we talked more and more about it with Rona, who's our production designer, was about like, you know, it's almost like you want to feel like Mei is directing and art directing and scoring and everything. Like you want it to feel so kind of from her perspective, like the color choices and the lighting and even the music, you know, like what her theme, she's like, this is how my theme is going to go. Like we talked to the composer about it. So I think a lot of that was kind of figuring out kind of what was going to drive all of the stylistic choice, and coming up with the fact that this is kind of coming from her perspective. I mean, she introduces herself to camera. We've never had a character who does that before. So the fact that she just kind of unapologetically is like, hi, I'm Mei, and this is my story, kind of led us all to kind of start to kind of clarify where the vision was going and what the design and look would feel like.
Yeah, it's like I feel like our intention from the beginning was to offer this window into the world, into the secret world of tween girls, because not a lot of people, I feel like at least half of the world has no idea like this, like what goes on in our lives, like during this time when like our emotions are roiling inside of us and we're like, you know, fighting with our moms every day. We're like horny for, you know, kids at school and like boy band magazine covers. It's a roller coaster of emotion, and it's embarrassing to like remember what it was like, but it's also but it's something that we all went through, and it was just a really fun opportunity to be able to kind of revisit our 13-year-old selves. And then it also really helped too, like when we first started like, you know, casting this film and like thinking about like, and for me too, like thinking about the main collaborators in this movie, like it was important for me to be working with people who have had that experience of being a nerdy, sweaty tween girl at some point in their lives. So, you know, it just happened to turn out that like most of our leadership was like women who have gone through Mei's experience and who have had that inner wild beast that they've had to tame or embrace in their lives.
I think that really did make a huge difference, because I think, you know, in a movie like this, and certainly in the finished product, you can see that, to your point, like we don't shy away from kind of pushing on funny and like embarrassing and mortifying moments. And I think if, you know, if we had maybe been surrounded with people who haven't had those experiences, it would have made us maybe second guess a little bit and maybe pull back and be like, oh, is that too much? Or is that ever this? But having so many people on the film in the room at any given time going, oh, no, that's not too much. That happened to me, or do it more, push that, kind of made us kind of bolder, I guess, to some degree, or made us confident in those choices.
The stakes in the movie are so incredibly smart and real, and like the smallest thing can feel like life or death at that age. And I'm curious how you settled on concert tickets being the main goal. Like, how did you?
It just seems so true to our own experience. Like I remember, like I never got to go to that boy band concert like Mei did in the movie, but I remember when I was her age.
I was so glad she got to.
I know, it's kind of like making this movie was like wish fulfillment for my 13-year-old self. I do remember that feeling of like envy and longing when I saw my classmates coming into school the next day, and they had the t-shirts and all the merchandise, and they had some, like they felt transformed in some way. And I was just thinking in my mind, like, man, like they just went to the concert, girls, and they came out like women, and what is that like? And then remembering that feeling.
Like, who was your teen obsession?
For me, well, I wasn't as into boy bands. Well, I would say NSYNC would be my like favorite boy band at the time, but I was also really into Spice Girls as well. It was like the late 90s, early 2000s, so there are a lot of those bands that I was not allowed to go to or see. But yeah, it's like you said, like when you're that age, like something so small, like going to a concert could feel so huge. And I think the more specific our character's goal and drive is. I think the deeper the story can be, the funnier it can be, the more truthful it can be, and the more unique it can be. So I think it was just us leaning into who our character was.
I love what you were saying. You touched on so many things before, but thank you for casting like national treasure Sandra Oh. She is like the most amazing. And then it makes total sense when you said everything was from May's point of view, that Billie Eilish and Phineas felt like the perfect fit to do the music. And how was collaborating with that, and how did that come to be?
I have 3 teens at home, and so
And now you're the best mom in the world.
You would think, right? They haven't kind of gotten that memo yet. But you know, the only kind of hip factor I have anymore is the fact that I am kind of surrounded by teens. So therefore I'm somewhat in the know on stuff. But I think for a while, obviously, Billy and Phineas's music had been playing in our house and in our car, and so I was a fan, like everybody else. But this was kind of, I mean, we started talking to them before they won every possible Grammy under the sun. So we were like, would they ever? And we kind of were like, it's such a weird ask. It's not like your traditional, like, hey, could you write an end credit song for us? And, you know, we can just use it. It was very much like we want you to write and be like a boy band. And obviously, you know, Billie has been super public about being a huge fan herself as a girl, and that she, you know, Justin Bieber and everything. I mean, she's done a lot of kind of interviews about all that. And so something about, did you?
I have it. This is the pitch. This is like the pitch Bible that we like gave them when we first pitched the movie idea to them. We went all out. We like pretended like it was May's notebook. We like made up fake concert stubs.
This is amazing.
I know, it's so funny. And we like kind of pitched like the rough version of the movie. It's like these girls are trying to get to this concert, but this one girl just poops into a hormonal red panda every time she gets emotional. We even did this creepy thing of like gluing their faces onto a photon and being like, do you want to make a boy band with us?
Like, it wasn't professional at all. I mean, we totally.
No, this is literally held together by school glue, and yeah, it's pretty funny.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we sent it to them, and we figured since it was such a weird ask, it was like, how do we get them to understand what we're going for? At least take a meeting. We just wanted them to take a meeting.
Just want a meeting.
And they did. And we went down and pitched it to them, and kind of said, this is what we're looking for. And, you know, you can be in it. You could be one of the members of the boy or not, like, but either way, we'd love to have you kind of, if you'd be up for it, write and pretend to be this boy band. And I think before we even landed at home, flying back up here, I think they had responded and said, yeah, they were up for it.
I mean, what a fun ask too. Like, if somebody asked you to pretend you're a boy band, you'd be like,
they totally got it. They were like, sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were super collaborative too, because this wasn't your ordinary, like Lindsay said, it's not just write a random pop song that we're going to insert at the end credits. This is like we actually had requests about what each song should be about and what the lyrics should touch on. Like the first song was like, this is supposed to be a confidence booster. This is in the scene where May's friends are singing to her to cheer her up, because she's feeling really like sad and depressed about her big hairy body. So the lyrics have to speak to like, you know, like how awesome she is. And can there also be a little bit of beatboxing in there too, because we have this fun little animation thing that we want to do with beatboxing. And they're like, sure, we'll put it in.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And like for the second song, it was like, we need like a very heartfelt, heart on your sleeve, like love ballad. And this was supposed to play in the scene that got deleted where Miriam, May's best friend, finds out she has to move away, and then the two of them sing this really cheesy, cute love song together in the hallways. And then the third song was it's the song that everybody knows, and it's supposed to be like that big like concert song that they sing in Act 3. And we specifically requested, can there be a call and response section of the song? So that's why they wrote in, you want it, I want it, you want it, I want, like
that's amazing.
They took all of our notes, and it was incredible to be able to just work so collaboratively with them.
fangirls when they sent up the demos. We were like, oh my God.
Okay, I have to ask you a little bit about Bao, because that was your last project, I think, and that was one, obviously, best animated short. And it also has these really complicated family dynamics and deals with them in like a really fresh and surprising way. So I just like, what learnings or what did you learn from Bao that you brought to Turning Red? And my ultimate question is, what does your mom think of the movie?
Yeah, man, I feel like I mean, so many creative people probably feel the same way, but I really do use like art and animation as like therapy.
Yeah.
And you can see that with Bao and with Turning Red. And I realized after making Bao, this story about this like empty nester mom who's dealing with her emotions about her son leaving the nest in the form of this sentient dumpling boy, that I still had a lot to unpack with, I think, with my relationship with my own mom. I think for a lot of mothers and daughters, especially like Asian mothers and daughters, immigrant mothers and daughters, it's so complex, like I think it's like the closest relationship that we have, like between our mothers, but also it's the most volatile. And I think I wanted to like understand why that was. Like, why is it that when I was growing up, I wanted my mom's approval and love, but at the same time, I just wanted to like be like, F it, I just want to get the F out of here. Like, like I hated my mom, but I loved her at the same time. And it's just this like contrasting emotion that I think I just wanted to be able to unpack and unwrap and discover with this in making Turning Red. And then to that other question of what did my mom think of it, well, I think like the movie like almost forced us to have a little bit of that conversation, but it's still like we had that conversation in the most like indirect Asian mother-daughter way. It was at the Toronto premiere of Turning Red, and I had invited my parents to come see it. And my dad, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He was emotional. He was like so proud of me. He was like gushing about the movie that night. And then my mom was a little bit more reserved. Like she was smiling, she was happy, but she like held back on like her her feelings about it until the next day, where like I received like a giant like block of text that was pretty much like complimenting and admiring every little detail and nuance about the movie. Like she picked up on details that I would not have thought that she would have noticed.
It was the first time she saw it?
It was the first time she saw it. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it took her a whole night to kind of process the movie. And then she like wrote this whole block of text telling me how much she loved the movie and every like detail and aspect of it. And then she ends it with, I hope I was a good mother. And I was like, oh my God, that was like so beautiful and devastating. And then of course I texted back like, oh my gosh, you totally were. I wouldn't be here without you. I love you. And then texted back, I'm crying now. And I'm like, I guess that means she loves me too. But yeah, it was us sorting through stuff through text and like a day after the fact. But yeah.
What's so interesting, because something that you're describing, and Mei is experiencing, all the friends are experiencing, but how when you are the daughter of an immigrant parent, that your cultural identity is also tied to them. So this thing you're explaining about wanting to run away, but also being tied, is like your very identity and who you are is kind of in this. You need them in this way to kind of explain a whole half of yourself. And then you need to be away from them for the other half to develop. It's like such a unique position. And I found like Mei and each one of her friends just relating to that specific journey in each of them.
Yeah. It was also like, like Mei's struggle in like, how do I honor my parents and my family, but also honor like myself and who I and who I'm turning into, which is this, this wild beast that my mom may not approve of and wants me to get rid of. And I think that was one of the trickiest parts of the movie to write and to figure out was that, like, what does that resolution look like between Mei and her mother Ming at the end of the movie? Like when they're standing at the portal in the, you know, astral plane in the mystical bamboo forest, and they're basically like, that's the scene where they basically have to come to terms with the fact that Mei is changing, she's growing up, and so as a result their relationship is going to be forever changed. Like it's never going to be like back when Mei was a little girl and she was her mom's mini me. Like she's growing into a different person and going into this different world away from her mother. And what does Ming say to Mei to like make her feel like her mother still loves her, but things are a little different now, but the love is still there, and that her mom is still proud of her, and supportive of her, without actually having Ming say those lines like, I love you and I support you, because, you know, to stay true to a lot of Asian families and Asian culture, like saying I love you is not a thing. It's like more like in action, in the food we cook for our loved ones, in how we fuss over them. That's how we show our love. But in this moment, like Ming had to say something. So it was something that Julia Cho, our writer, had to like rewrite a million times, like what Ming says to Mei in that moment. And then I think this was like the very last screening, the last couple of months of production, where she finally hit on that line. It's the further you go, the prouder I'll be. And I remember when Julia pitched that line, I was like, oh, that's it. Like that hit me. And I was like that's what that is. Like that is that bittersweet experience of being a parent, but also being an immigrant parent too, like who moves to a different country, who sacrifices so much for their kid, knowing that their kid is going to grow up in a different language, in a different world, and is going to be a little won't be in the same world as them.
And I, as like the Western white girl, was like, why doesn't she just say she loves her and she's proud of her? And like Julie and Domee were like,
no.
Sorry,
that's like saying,
all right, fine, I get it.
Well, speaking of that, like how, you know, it was like you read your credits and it's like you walk the walk and behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera. And that is something that people talk about, like it's almost impossible to accomplish, and it's not, and you did it. And how did you do it so seemingly effortlessly?
Yeah, like, so I think it's inclusion, like it starts from the very seed of the idea, right? Like the fact that this movie was pitched as a Chinese Canadian girl going through magical puberty, fights with her mom, all the ups and downs of growing up, and that was always there from the beginning. And I think when studios acknowledge and invest in those stories from the ground up, I think that sets a good example and precedence for the rest of like the production to be cast in a more inclusive way. But it's also like on the part of every person that comes on the show. Like for me, I wanted to make sure, like from the beginning, that I was not the only Asian voice in the room, that I was not the only female voice in the room, because that there's so many different experiences to being Asian, to being a woman and a girl growing up. So it was important for me to have, Julia Cho, our writer, who's Korean American, Rona Liu, our production designer, who's Chinese American. These were just key creative roles on the show that I felt like had to be filled by people who could speak to that experience, so that if I'm not in the room, that like I know that they have like references to draw from in order to be able to do their job in the most effective way. It also just takes the pressure off of me too, because I'm like, oh God, yes, it's not just me representing all Asian women in this world. I have allies with me in this room, and I think that helped a lot.
Is there a sequence in the movie that, you know, there's always, as a director, there's always a part of the film or the show that you're doing that you that seems so easy, but like if only people knew how difficult that sequence was. Like, what is one aspect of the movie that you are like, wow, you would not have guessed it. You probably would have thought this whole big, you know, giant effect was difficult, but what really was hard to pull off was this sequence.
You know what was one?
Yeah.
Turns out teen girls or tween girls, they hug each other a lot. They touch their hair a lot. They have lots of layered clothing. They have
Accessories. Yeah.
Backpacks with Tamagotchis that hang off of them. All of that is actually incredibly difficult to animate and to simulate. Like, so all of that cloth simulation, you know, you kept being like, do they need to touch each other so much or hug or, you know, is it? And we're like, yeah, I mean, that's how tween girls are behaving. Or do they have to have backpacks? Or do they have to have, and it was like, yeah, that's what it is. So I think what surprised all of us was just the complexity of, we call it simulation. I mean, it's cloth simulation or hair simulation that, you know, it sounds like it's like, how big of a deal is that? Isn't it just automatic? And it's like, oh no, it's automatic when you're not really interacting with anything, but these fact that these girls, to make them behave in a way that felt authentic and right, and to move and to wear things that felt authentic was remarkably expensive, it turns out. I feel like that's way as a mom too, like tween girls are remarkably expensive in real life too, for all those same reasons. But yeah, it turns out on film they're remarkably expensive too.
Yeah, every time you see Mei on screen with a dangly Tamagotchi, yeah, a very talented and overworked simulation artist had to make that happen. And it was something that we had to fight for from the beginning, because we're like, we just need to give her one little accessory. It just adds so much character. It's going to come back in the movie. It's going to be a symbol of her friendship with Miriam, Abby, and Priya. We're going to pay it off in a huge way. It also just sets the era of the movie. You like know immediately that it takes place in the 2000s. But yeah, that was very tricky to do.
And then I think we're close to our end. So if there's any message or feeling that you want people to get when they see the movie, what was your sort of hope that people will take away when they watch Turning Red?
Yeah, I mean, I just hope when people watch the movie that they just remember how messy and cringy and funny growing up was, and that and what that time in all of our lives was like. And also, like, I just hope like people I don't know, like, I hope they just walk away with a better understanding of all of the women and girls in their lives. Like, yes, like this is a great movie just to be able to like show people who have no idea what that's like if they have a daughter who's going through that, if they have a sister, even if they have moms or grandmas or like female relatives or girlfriends. Yeah, this is just a good window into the, like, their psyche and
experience of being a tween girl.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for making this movie. You made it so beautifully and with so much heart, and you made it so personal, which is like obviously so universal to everybody. But the humor is the thing that just, I'm so thankful. It was really funny and cringy and gross and hilarious, and just, you really captured what it's like to be a teen girl. And just, I think that is so important to keep telling these stories and making these movies, because no one does really. So thank you for doing it, and for doing it so well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for watching.